All right, guys, we're going to get started. We're going to be going over a little bit more into the RaceDay scoring application. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. I'm also going to take some of your questions as we go through these things. So what I'm just going to do is walk through this a little bit slower. There's a lot of stuff in here and a lot of settings that I want to describe and explain to you. So the first thing is this timing devices. So there's a lot of different device types that we have here. Obviously, a manual device is if you would only be collecting times manually via the timing locations scored read table. You can just plug in those times like I was showing you one by one. Usually, you'll set up a start line as manual if you aren't expecting to collect start reads at all. Again, the standard chip systems are like ChronoTrack and MyLapse. If you are using a system type that's active, like MyLapse Pro chip, this tells the system to look in the RunSignUp has a column for chip code. So you would load in your chip codes cross-references into your RunSignUp race, and we'll provide a utility in RaceDay scoring to allow you to upload that cross-reference yourself as well if you need to. If you're using a passive system like their bib tag, then obviously it knows what bib code to look up based on that. And we'll provide ways for you to go in and manually edit that. Again, race result, standard stuff, RFID, standard stuff. The IPCO file import we have does work currently. We were able to get that out just last week. We just have to browse for the folder path. So keep in mind, this is the folder path we're looking for, not the actual file itself. So what that means is that if you have multiple IPCO files in a single folder, you might have a finish folder where you're dumping a ton of files into. It's going to consider all of those files at once. So keep that in mind when you're trying this out. You can set the file extension here. So a lot of times IPCO files come in the log format, so you can just type in log there. If you only want to consider the CSV or TXT file formats, you would just type that in here. The stream is the same as the other chip scoring formats. This file type is what I wanted to go through right now, though. So this is going to be our way to accept anything that doesn't fit the standard profiles currently. And what we'll be able to do here is, again, browse for a folder path. So you might have a folder for all of your finish files. Your file extension, it could be log, it could be CSV, it could be TXT. And this is your passing format. So we have a little guide here on the different fields you could include in your file. So basically, you might have a file that you're just typing in that is bib code, comma, time. And then if you just set it up like this, we'll be able to ingest that file and put it into our scored reads table. So this is nice if you have a weird file you're working with or you messed up something from your RFID server output so that you look at your TXT and you can figure out, like, here's the column for the time, here's the column for the bib, and so on. So this lets us customize to fit any kind of CSV file output that you have. This is also really nice. What I'd recommend for a lot of timers is you can download all sorts of apps on your phone to do manual backups. I know there's like WebScore and a few others that you can use to just plug in a bunch of times and bibs and timestamps, and those get output into a standard format. So if you know the standard format of those applications, you could use this file type to define the passing format and ingest any kind of manual backup data. So any questions on that?
Is it in the roadmap to support any of those specific apps or time backup devices?
I mean, what we'll do is if they are writing to a file, we can put in like the standard format for it. Like we know WebScore does bib, time, date, or something. We could write up presets for sure. It just depends on how long we want to make this device type list, I suppose. Maybe we'll add a secondary drop down here that can say standard format options, web score, PC timer, all of those different ones.
So Matt, when I set that up once, I would be able to reuse that across multiple races.
Yes, that's true.
Across multiple scoring PCs and stuff like that.
Yeah. So this, when you set up a device, I should say this, when you set up a device here, this information is stored in your PC and can be accessed in any of your races. So if you set up a web scorer device with a standard format, you'll be able to use it in others very easily. It would just be in a part of your timing devices list here, and it may be unassigned or it may be assigned to a timing location in this race. So basically what you'll end up having eventually is a big list of race devices for all the different devices that you use generally, and you can click the unassigned filter to see any of the devices that have not currently been assigned to a timing location, and the assigned filter to see any devices that you have that have been assigned to a timing location.
So what is happening underneath the covers is that everything is stored as a JSON file. So every definition that gets put into here gets stored as a JSON file, and it gets shared with, say you've got 5 different timing PCs, it can get shared through all those, via the cloud and syncing and stuff like that. The other thing is that a lot of these JSON files, we're going to, at some point in time, create some sort of forum and sharing. So, and then there'll be mechanisms to load in different types of these definitions.
Yeah.
So I think the more common definitions are going to be down at the bottom around how you do scoring, how you do results. But that can also apply to these things up at the top, like timing devices. And those can be shared publicly or just shared privately. So, if you come up with some sort of special way that you want to publish your results and you don't want any other timer to steal that, you keep that shared. But if you think, that this is great and you want to brag about it, then you'll put it onto this forum and stuff.
Yeah, basically what we envision in the future is to be, you have your timer dashboard that we did a renovation of, and we want to make a timer community part of RunSignUp on the line so that you can share all of your timing device definitions, or your report definitions, your scoring modules, and so on, those kind of things. We want to be able to allow people to open it up for discussion. They can share the files. You can see the JSON. Maybe someone's having trouble with one of theirs, so another timer can take a look at it, load it into their system, see what line it's off, make an adjustment, reshare it back to them, and pull it down. So that's kind of the concept going forward we want to support. We like the idea of timers talking to each other and getting involved. It makes it more exciting. It makes it a lot easier if you have 5 people looking at your mess up than only yourself.
Matt, can I go backwards a little? Like, the device and the location are clearly, in my head, different. For the device, if I have 3 pieces of hardware that are the same type of hardware, they're a yellow box, would the device name be yellow box 1, yellow box 2? If you already have location as a separate modifier, is device a unique description for that particular piece of hardware? Or would you say, I have 3 of them, so I only need to define it once, and then locate it 1, 2, 3 times?
So it depends on what you're using it for, but what I'll say is that you're using, what chip system are you using?
Bunches, IPGO,
Yeah.
you name it.
So most of the time, you'll have middleware for your chip system, where you can combine things into a single location or whatever if you want to make those reads filter down into one data stream, right? So we hook up to that data stream and we say that that is one device right now. We can't talk directly to that hardware on a one-on-one basis. We talk to the middleware who is sending that stream out.
So if I have, I'm doing a triathlon and I have swim, finish, bike start, bike finish, run start. That's 4 locations. I may not be using the same type of hardware and middleware. So what's my...
Yeah, so for that situation, it would be a one-to-one relationship. You would just have one device for each timing location. Like I had talked about in the last presentation, basically Most of the time, it will be that scenario, and we're going to make it a little bit easier. Right now, it's a little complicated because we have both of these. The reason you want to have multiple devices is if you have an additional way to time the event that you'd like to provide a manual backup for.
So a device can be just a definition that gets used multiple times.
It can be, yeah. But basically, the concept would be this. Let's say I'm timing a triathlon and I have physical chip hardware out at one of the timing locations, one of the timing points. That is going to be my device 1. And I have someone sitting in a chair doing spot checking, bibs, and times on an iPad that's saving to a Dropbox folder. That's device 2.
Okay, and I get that. So, but now you have 4 different places you're using device 1. So that's not, the device is not tied to the physical hardware. It's to the definition of the communication.
Yes. So yeah, that's exactly it. We want basically the location to be that physical location. So it's going to be, if you have bike in, bike out, or you have, T1 out and so on, those are the locations. What we have to do is, for a triathlon specifically, you have to set up the segments to consider different occurrences on those locations to determine your splits and so on.
Oh, that makes sense. I guess a device to me, I was thinking of a single piece of hardware.
Sure, yeah, I understand. Yeah, it is a complicated definition there because we want to have the ability to have multiple devices pumping down into one location to make your scored reads, essentially. That device could be a standard chip output file. It could be, like I said, the iPad pushing out results to a Dropbox folder. It could be your actual chip hardware that is publishing out via a TCP/IP stream. But within that, you could assign multiple devices. Also, in timing and scoring or in any of your middleware, you could create a single device per location in timing and scoring and create multiple TCP/IP streams that you could ingest directly as a single device. It's all on how you want to set it up.
Yeah, I think the device IP address under advanced started to confuse me. That to me meant single hardware.
Oh, I understand. Yeah. Right now, that's not doing anything, actually. It's just an identifier internally, so for me, I always wrote down the IP addresses of all my devices, so I like to be able to identify which device is which. But that's all that's there for right now. Starting, stopping, replaying, and clearing. The way this works is, most important ones here would be clear and replay. If you clear a device, it doesn't actually clear the physical hardware itself. What it does is it clears out our connector software of any reads. So you would just have to replay anything from your middleware to push results back through. This is if, for some reason, something happened and you need to just start fresh from this timing device. You can clear it here, and it'll just clear from your middleware on, but it won't clear out your actual middleware, it won't clear out your devices, and so on. It's just going to clear that database that we have here hosted. With replay, it is a similar thing, but it just sends right back through again.
So do you have the notion of starting the race from within the software, or do you always start within your middleware?
You can start it wherever you want to. With the way that we do it and the way we do it in Race Director is you just set a start time of day here. If you do, I'm sure that we'll add the way to set a gunshot time from within here. The tricky part there obviously is getting your times in sync. So if you're a timer, you obviously have to make sure that all of your laptops, your hardware, everything is on the same clock time. So you would have to do some, making sure that all of your devices are thinking it's exactly the same time so that you get all of your times accurate. That's something that most timers are familiar with. A lot of timers have GPS units so they can sync to immediately for time sync. Their devices will have it. Their computers will have a dongle for it. But we would be able to do that, and it would just be a simple timestamp right now, plug it into my gun time, and that's it.
For me, it'd be ideal just to have a single user interface.
Yep. In the future, we're going to have something like that. That's where you would enter in your gun times, and I'm sure we'll add the ability to do a single start and race.
So your start and finish, is that sending a message to the middleware?
No, it's always collecting. This is essentially always collecting, and we are doing filtering to determine how to collect what read it will be. So on the timing devices, I'll just show you a start finish, which is probably the most complicated one.
You're just filtering everything you get.
Yeah.
Right, based on start finish.
Yeah. So if you set a start finish device, start. And then I create a location. For start, I'll use this one. I'm going to say it's a start and a finish. You get a lot more options here. And the way we decided to do a start finish is we're going to say, of this data stream, I'm going to determine what portion of this data stream is start reads, because what it's going to do is it's going to say, give me the very last read for each person to mark it as their start time, right? So I'm going to say, I know the very last person crossing the start time crossed at 6:34 p.m. So it's going to try and get the very last time. It's going to keep sending up new reads for each person until it's determined that this is the very last time I saw this, until 6:34. And then at which time we'll flip it and say, okay, I know the first finisher came in at 06:50 or something. And then from that point on, what it does is the standard process where it says, okay, that's the very first time I saw that bib, that's your finish time. So these filters are the way to determine what the final reads are for people, what the scored reads, that's what we refer to them as. And again, if you have a finish or a start/finish, you can always set a number of occurrences in here to use later for your segment definitions. So I could say, starting at 6:50, they're going to cross over this map a bunch of times. So let's say I'm going to expect them to cross 3 times, and the third time might be their final read. But within that, I've got a couple of laps I want to define. So this is where we begin to get into gap factors, which is where we need to define a timeout. I know that no one's going to run a lap faster than 10 minutes, let's say. So then in this gap factor, I would say 0 hours, 10 minutes between laps after the first occurrence to determine the second occurrence. And then maybe they go on a longer loop for their next lap, and I would say 20 minutes between the second occurrence and the third occurrence. Does that make sense? So if you define it this way, we would be able to go into our segment definitions and create a bunch of different segments based on the start location and the finish location, along with any of the occurrences that are available on the finish location. So I could say, I'm going to create a segment from using the start line to the second occurrence in the finish line, or I'm going to create a segment that's the first occurrence in the finish line to the third occurrence in the finish line. Or I'm going to do any number of combinations of those you can create a timed segment for. Also, I don't know if I went over this, there's under timing locations we allow filters for only accept bibs between these, only accept times between those. So if you want to set up separate locations just for a certain bib range, you could do that here. If you're saying that I know for sure I'm only accepting times on the grand scale between this time and that time, you could do it here. We're just trying to support as much as possible in terms of filtering, because that's what the software is really doing. It's taking this big data set, whittling it down, and determining the results rankings from that. So yes, the device actions, I didn't get to start and stop. The start and stop is pretty much just, if you need to for some reason, pause the playing from your, not from the middleware, but the middleware will continue playing, but we just want to hold it in reserve until next time you click start, you can just do a stop and a start. We want to just support it. I'm not sure yet if there are use cases to support it, but we have the capability there if you need to. You can do a manual CSV import into scored reads, the table there. So again, you can define a manual device type, or you could just import a bunch of missed reads here. A lot of times you'll have people like at a triathlon sitting, just taking down notes of who came across about at what time, and you don't want to create a new device type for that. You could just import it to the existing scored reads table using this. Sorry, timing locations right now has a scored reads table here, so you can click into the reads for that location. Let's see, what do I want to go over more of? Yeah, segments, we can talk a little bit more about this. Again, you can create any type of segment here. When you create a segment, it gives you the new calculation of that segment time automatically. So what we have is the concept of custom fields. Custom fields are like generated times, for instance. It could also be like a team score. It could also be an age percentage or something that's calculated from other fields in our database. When you set up this new segment UI, what it's saying is figure out the time from this read to that read and put it into a column. So right now we allow you to create these segments to generate those times based on what locations you have and what occurrences have happened on those locations. In the future, what we're going to do is open up that capability to allow you to programmatically define any sort of data that you want. So you might want to set up a custom way to score an event based on a percentage of time back from the first finisher or something. And if we don't have that capability built in right away, you could code that out and figure it out, or we could help you try and determine it so that you can write a custom scoring item to be put into your reports. So basically, anything really, really custom, we will support in the future. And if it's a good feature, we'll probably add it and bake it in. So again, with these segments, it's good to know that you can define these on the occurrence level. So like I was saying before, I might have a 2-mile split that uses the finish line twice, just different occurrences on it. So I could say from the first occurrence on the finish to the second occurrence on the finish, make a split of 2 miles, so on and so forth. And this, again, is using the settings from the timing location setup to determine all of this. So what this would do is give me, I'm not sure actually if it's working right now, but what it would do is it would give me additional columns that I can include in my reports for each of those times that I've generated now. Let's go over reports a little bit deeper. So we do allow right now just these 4 options of view, which is your standard just HTML kind of view here. You can download to an HTML. In the future, what we'll do is we'll give you the ability to customize a lot more in here. Basically, you could define, like we have some colors for females and males. We've bolded clock time and chip time. This is just some standard, like hard-coded stuff that we put in. What we'll do is we're going to have a secondary configuration page for HTML. So you could basically say, I want age to be centered. I want clock time to be right justified. All of that stuff we're going to open up eventually. Right now, we just have it hard-coded in. But so if you want to have an HTML file that's sent up to your server or stored locally for display somewhere else, we would do that here. Again, CSV downloads, pretty standard stuff. Formats it the way you want it. We will allow some configuration there. We could probably allow you to do some changes in terms of the formatting if you want to have CSV or how you want to do that, if you need semicolons or tabs or anything like that, or your clock time formatting and those kind of things. Right now, again, a lot of this is hard-coded in there just for demonstration purposes.
The pricing of this. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
have Race Director now. Is RDGo?
You got it. It's free.
Oh, cool.
So what we're going to do is this will be included with any Race Director purchase. So if you purchase a Race Director license, you get access to this. We're not going to part it out. It's just going to be part of Race Director. We're going to write a manual when the software is getting close to being ready. Right now, like I had said, a lot of this stuff is really confusing because we built out a lot of the functionality, but we haven't packaged it together very well yet. So, like I said before, this is alpha. I hesitate to call it alpha. I call it pre-alpha because it's not ready for public consumption. It's not easy to use. It's very confusing. So, this stuff, it's not going to be the final version.
Probably another month or two, we'll have a bunch of these tabs will have a much friendlier UI.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, we'll do some webinars and some more detailed blogs, and James will start to write some documentation for his connector software and stuff like that. So Yeah, this is alpha.